All right. Welcome to the back of the band room. My name is Trey Cross. Today we have a very special guest. This is Charlie Nesmith. Charlie is a music educator, a percussionist, and the host of the Flying Baton podcast. He's been an educator for 16 years in the Virginia public school system, and currently he's one of two band directors at Shelburne Middle School in Staunton, Virginia. During his time there, he has founded the Woodwind Ensemble, an extensive free after-school lesson program, an annual Halloween concert, and an annual band banquet performance where students show off their solo and ensemble skills in a banquet fundraiser setting. He served as the principal percussionist of the Waynesboro Symphony Orchestra under the direction of Peter Wilson for the last 9 years. He is also a founding member of the Valley Wind Ensemble from Harrisonburg, Virginia. Prior to becoming a professional educator and percussionist, Charlie received his Bachelor's of Music from Radford University in 2006, where he was awarded the Presser Scholarship. He also marched in the 2004 Crossband Drum and Bugle Corps under the direction of Lee Bettis, Stephen Ballard, and Drew Schneiders. When he's not enjoying performing or teaching music, Charlie's an avid PC gamer, rollerblader, and hiker. He's also enjoyed 15 years of marriage with his wife, Kate, and he's currently learning how to be a good dad to his hyperactive toddler, Noah. Now, that is what the shelburneband.com/meet the directors page says, but I would also like to just thank you for the content you've been putting out for so long. I mean, I still have notebooks of notes I took on some of your marimbology episodes. And just, again, thank you for that. I mean, it's hard to put out content. You kind of just for a long time have been putting out a lot of great stuff. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So as far as so in 2009, that's when I started releasing YouTube videos for marimbology. And the whole reason why I did that is because I actually started my career teaching math. I was a math teacher for 5 years. And my major was in music education and my minor was in math, but there weren't any band jobs open in the area that I wanted to live. And my wife and I were scheduled to get married. And I was like, I really can't live anywhere else. Like I have to live here if we're going to get married. So I started teaching math and I just really wanted to be, in the music field. So I started uploading those videos until I got it kind of transitioned my career into teaching music. And after I started teaching middle school band, I pretty much stopped making videos because I was getting my fix.
Now, you've been directing for, what was it, like 16 years or something?
Yeah, so I've been an official band director since 2011. But I've been doing middle school band for the last 11 years. And absolutely love it. I did high school for a little bit, but I really just miss being in the middle school classroom. And I made the transition to middle school band and I absolutely love it. I really enjoy starting the kids from scratch. I think it's a huge challenge to take, like an 11-year-old and teach them how to play every single instrument because every kid is different and they approach things differently. And it's a huge mental workout, which I really appreciate and enjoy. I also like building them from the ground up, kind of like the way that I want them. Like a lot of high school directors, like they complain about their feeder and everything. It's like, I have no one to complain about. If they don't know something, it's because I didn't teach them, So it's a lot, I like having like the responsibility of like, I need to teach them all these things that they need to know to go on. And I just really appreciate that.
So you're at Shelburne Middle School?
Yeah, this is
What is the high school that you feed into?
Yeah, so Shelburne Middle School, I've been there for 10 years, and it feeds into a high school called Stanton High School, formerly known as Robert E. Lee High School. There were several Robert E. Lee High Schools in Virginia, but I think they've all changed their names now, I think. I think the last one just changed their name. So yeah, now it's just Stanton High School.
Are you involved at Stanton High School? Do you work with the front ensemble or anything like that?
I did a little bit with their marching band my very first 2 years, but after that, I kind of stepped back to focus more on the middle school. Now we do have two band directors at my middle school. So my other band director, John Wilson, he is the assistant director of the marching band. So he is involved there. So there is kind of a bridge between middle and high school there. But I don't have involvement with high school marching band anymore. I do a lot of judging in the area now. And if I were teaching them, that would be a bit of a conflict of interest. And I really enjoy judging. So I haven't stepped into that arena with the high school for quite some time.
But that is something you did for a while. That's a big part of what I do.
Yeah. So when I first started teaching, like I said, I taught math for 5 years. And I kind of stayed plugged into music by teaching drum lines and marching bands of a lot of the local high schools. And I did that for a long time. I think I did that for maybe 8 years or so. But I really just kind of fell in love with teaching middle school band, and I kind of cut away some other things from my schedule so I could focus on trying to get really good at just doing that. I mean, I do judge a lot, and that's very fun. But as far as the school year goes, I mainly focus on middle school.
Yeah. So I'm a contractor and I work at one high school and 5 or so middle schools across 2 different counties. And there's something very fun about the middle schoolers.
Yeah, middle schoolers are great, man. I love it. The way I describe it to people is middle schoolers are a bit like a mirror. Like whatever you give to them, they give right back to you. So if you're a boring person, they're going to be bored, right? If you come in the classroom with a lot of energy and excitement, they're going to have a lot of energy and excitement. If you come in and you're angry and you're like yelling at kids and stuff, they're going to get angry back. Like literally whatever you give to them, they give right back to you. And I really enjoy that relationship. High school is a bit different, you know? High schoolers tend to think they're really really too cool for everybody and everything, and winning over a high schooler is a lot different than winning over a middle schooler. Win over a middle schooler, you just have to be really excited. And I got that.
Oh,
I got that
well
on mark.
said.
That's no problem, right? High school is a little bit harder to win over, you know? But yeah, I do really enjoy the middle school crowd. I think it's super fun.
Do you have a percussion class or are all of your instruments together?
So the way that we do it, we have 2 band directors and we have 2 rooms. 6th grade electives only share 2 blocks. So there's like 7th block band and there's 6th block band. So the way we split that up is in 6th grade, I have a clarinet saxophone class in my room. And in John's room, he has trumpet and horn. And then 7th block, I have flute, oboe, percussion. And he has all of the low brass plus bassoon. So in essence, in 6th grade, we have 4 classes in total. And then in 7th grade, we have a brass class and we have a woodwind percussion class. And then in 8th grade, they're all in one class. So we start out with 4 classes and we gradually merge to 1, and it works out great. It's so nice to be able to have that schedule. And we see the kids for 45 minutes every day. And I absolutely love our schedule. It is it makes life so much easier than just mixing in all the kids. So my previous middle school, all the kids were just mixed together, and however guidance could fit them in your room is how they fit in your room. And that's really tricky when you have so many different instruments to teach from scratch. It's a little easier on the more advanced stages, the more advanced levels, high school, etc. But in middle school, when you're teaching someone how to put a reed on a clarinet, that takes a while. And if you have a bunch of flutes and trumpets and trombones, they just kind of have to sit there through it, unless you're bringing in a lot of outside people to help you out. So being able to split things up is really nice. I don't have percussionists on their own. In some respects, I would like to, but I like that they're with flute and oboe because they read in about the same range in the beginning of the year. And they get to hear a lot of the terminology that we use with winds, and they get to kind of figure out how that terminology translates to percussion. So I'd be able to teach them more efficiently if they were on their own, but I do like that they are with the rest of the band. And that definitely helps when we're preparing for concerts because they get to play their parts with the wind players. And the first time they're doing that isn't right before a concert. They're doing it the whole year. So, I can go either way in that, but I do like the way that we have it set up right now.
So are you able to do any sort of percussion ensemble stuff with that combined class?
So the way that we have things set up in 7th and 8th grade, I can do a percussion sectional whenever I want. Because 7th and 8th grade are all co-taught. So at any point, I can just say, all right, today's going to be percussion sectional, which is amazing, I know that is a luxury. If any band directors are listening who did not have a second director, I know that is a luxury. But I haven't started an after-school percussion ensemble yet. I want to do one next year. My 6th and 7th grade percussionists this year are just off the chain good, and I want to keep them challenged. So I think I'm going to start an after-school percussion ensemble next year. I do have an after-school woodwind ensemble that I do in the fall, and that's really fun. We learn a bunch of Christmas music, and then we go and play at every single elementary school in December. Then we go down to City Hall. We play for City Council. We play for the school board and the superintendent, and it's a great recruitment tool, but it's also a good way to kind of get us out there. But that's only in the first semester. Second semester, I don't do any after-school ensembles, so I think I would like to do a percussion ensemble next year and do a similar sort of thing.
Cool. Great. All right. So what are some of your favorite fixes from the podium for your drummers?
That is a very broad question. If I could steer that question in a slightly different direction, I think, oh man, I'm gonna have to get on a high horse here. I apologize. So as a percussionist band director, sometimes I get a little bit frustrated with some of my colleagues who are not percussionists because as a percussionist, when I started teaching band, I had to work so hard to learn all of the techniques for woodwinds and brass and all of the terminology and the skills and the tone production and like practicing all of those instruments to get a good sound on all of them so I can model that to my students. Like I had to spend so much time learning about woodwinds and brass. And I don't feel like some directors who are wind players put in the same amount of effort to learn about percussion. And I think it's a little bit of a disservice to their students. Now, this isn't everybody, but it's a sizable quantity of directors. And I think it's just doing the students a bit of a disservice. To give you an example, one of my friends called me up last year, who shall remain nameless, but she's been teaching for about 17 years, same as me. And she called me up and said, "Hey, what does it mean when a snare drum has like slashes on the notes?" You know, and my head just kind of exploded for a second. I was like, "You've been teaching for," and I didn't say this, obviously, like I helped her out, but I was like, "You've been teaching for 17 years and don't know how snare rolls are notated?" Like, that blows my mind. Like, could you imagine if I called up my friend Claire, who's an amazing flute player at Harrisonburg High School? If I called up my friend Claire and I said, "Hey, what does it mean when flutes have like dots on top of their notes?" You know, she would look at me like
Yes.
crazy, right? She'd
Yep.
look at me like I was nuts. So I feel like a lot of band directors don't do the due diligence to learn about the percussion. Like a lot of times they joke about it like, "Oh yeah, I don't know anything about percussion. Ha ha ha." And I'm like, I don't think it's that funny. Like you're really doing those students a disservice. Now, if you're in a district who has a percussion specialist who can come in and do that, then great. Then maybe you don't need to learn about it, you know? Or if you're in Texas and you have 5 band directors and one of them's a percussionist, cool. I mean, that's fine. But if you're in a school where you're the only person, like you really do need to learn some of that stuff. Like you don't have to be an expert player, but there's certain things you need to learn in order to effectively teach those students. And anyone who's listening to this podcast is already like in the right zone because they're here to learn that stuff and to get better. So this does not apply to anybody who's listening to us talk right now. But I think a lot of like quote fixes happen from being educated on how the instruments work. So I'll give you an example. I've submitted to present at our state conference next year, and they're still deciding what sessions are going to be in and out. So I don't know if I've been selected yet, but I've submitted to do one specifically on really quick fixes for percussion for band directors that don't know a lot about percussion. And a lot of that is going to focus around snare drum specifically, but I'll touch on all the instruments. So I listen to a lot of auditions and district auditions, all state auditions, and I just hear a lot of really weird things at some of those auditions. And I think probably my biggest gripe is actually snare rolls. So some quick fixes for any snare drum playing is in concert band, the kids should not be playing with their sticks in the center of the drum, like pretty much ever, right? Like they need to be about halfway to the rim and not in the middle. The middle makes a very it makes like a popping sound. And if you try to do a buzz roll in the middle of the drum, it just doesn't sound smooth, right? So you've got to have the sticks like at least halfway to the edge to get like a really smooth, sustained roll. Hey, this is my 3-year-old Noah. Noah, can you say hi?
Hi, Noah. Hello. Oh my gosh. What do you think about snare drum rolls, Noah?
To say something hard. If you get shot, I'll come and check on you if you're hurt.
Wow.
That's what.
That's very sweet, little man. That's very.
What a nice guy.
All right, but I'm going to put you down.
Thank God he did that. Now I have the sound bite. I got it.
Oh my God. So yeah, so don't roll in the center of the drum. I really don't play in the center of the drum like ever. So halfway to the edge is good. Having some sort of snare muffling is my preference in concert band. So I just have like a little strip of bandana that I put closest to the player. Some people use moon gel. That's okay. Tone control rings, I think, give kind of a weird overtone, but they do work. So like that will instantly make the snare drummer sound better, regardless of what they're playing. Playing zones are a big thing that I see in a lot of bands. I just judged a couple different assessments in our area, and I see a lot of kids playing bass drum with the bass drum mallet kind of down by the rim, right? And that's going to
Yes.
be a very cloudy sound. Like usually you want it more towards the center. If it's a small bass drum, I play it in the center. If it's a large bass drum, slightly off center, but it gives you like a nice, like warm, bassy sound. And if the mallet, like a lot of kids, I think they're just lazy, right? And the mallet falls down to the rim, and then it gets this very slappy kind of cloudy sound. On the mallet instruments, oftentimes I hear kids playing with the sticks over the rope, or what we call the node of the bar. And that makes, so you hear this on auditions a lot. You're like, hey, play your B flat scale. And every B flat and E flat are really quiet, and all of the other notes are really loud because they're playing those accidentals right on top of the rope, and it mutes all the volume of the bar. So those particular notes are soft and all the other notes are loud. So like, a lot of like quote quick fixes, I think for band directors who don't know a lot about percussion, is really just where should the kids be striking the instrument? Like tambourine, right? Like usually if you have a tambourine with a head on it, you have to put your thumb on the head when you hit it, so otherwise it sounds kind of like a drum, so you have to mute the head a little bit when you hit it. Just like little things like that, like little quick fixes of like just knowing how the instrument should be played or where you should strike the instrument will massively increase the quality of sound in the percussion section. And then we can address like, the kid's technique and stuff like that. But just knowing kind of how the instruments work. Another huge one is knowing just a little bit of basics about tuning the percussion instruments. So the two biggest ones I get asked all the time is, sorry, my dog Luna. We have a guest coming later. I'm sorry. Is that loud? Can you hear that?
Oh, no, I can hear Luna for sure. Yes. But it's cool. Luna's awesome. I'm sure Luna is a really good dog.
I'm gonna go.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now she got it. So yeah. So the two questions I get asked a lot is about snare drum and timpani, right? So like, I don't know why she's still parking. Sorry.
She's practicing her roughs, man.
Sorry. You can cut all this out later.
Oh, no need. It's gold.
But yeah, so I get asked a lot about snare drum and timpani tuning specifically. So timpani, right? A lot of band directors say, hey, when I tune the timpani, the pedal moves, and I learned about, kind of the quick fix for that in drum corps. Actually, Steve Ballard taught me this. If the pedal wants to go down, then the drum wants to be lower. So you need to loosen the drum head, right? If the pedal wants to shoot up, then the drum wants to be higher. So you tune the drum tighter. And most of the time that fixes the issues. Or just, looking up in a range chart of what notes that drum should be able to play. If it's outside that range, there's going to be a lot of problems with the pedal. Snare drum, a lot of people over tighten the snares. So I end up fixing a lot of snare drums in our district. So like, if you buzz really softly, you should be able to hear the snare response. But if you crank the snares really tight, you can hear the snares if you hit the drum loud, but you can't hear them at all when you hit it soft because it's too tight to vibrate. So I end up going around and just like loosening a lot of snare strainers to be able to get that nice crisp response at a low dynamic level. So those are all like the big fixes. Like if I had to like get on my high horse about like, this will instantly make everyone's percussion section sound better, all of those things would definitely make everything sound better.
Yeah. So this is what I'm pretty interested in. I wonder if we have different answers for this. What does the first year of percussion look like for you? Like, what are you trying to get a sixth grader to be able to do before summer?
Okay. So I think this ties into one of your other questions later as well. But I am a firm believer that kids need to spend an equal amount of time on snare and mallets throughout all of middle school, but especially in sixth grade. So in the beginning stages, I will have all of the percussionists on one instrument. So like everyone's on a practice pad today, or everyone is on their bell set today, or everyone is on a snare drum today. But as they sort of learn the basics of those three things, and we get into like maybe November, December, from then until the end of 8th grade, I have an odd even rotation setup. So our fundamentals block is about 20 to 25 minutes every class. We just work on fundamentals. So I have this big chart on the board. So on even days, these people play snare and these people play mallets. And then on odd days, these people play mallets and these people play snare. So every single day from the middle of 6th grade until they leave my school, they swap between snare and mallets for warm-ups. every single day. And what's really great about that is not only do they get the experience on both instruments, but there's no fighting or arguing about it. Like some directors are like, hey, like I can't convince my kids to want to play mallets or this sort of thing. And it's like, if you just switch them every day, like from 6th grade on, then it's never a fight because they just know, oh, this is just how we do things here. So I'm a firm believer that they need to spend a lot of time on both instruments. And there's like a lot of cool ways you can kind of incorporate that into like very beginning band. Like if you have your flutes playing on a head joint, for example, and they're doing like long tones, in for 4, blow for 4, you can have your percussionists doing like 8 on a hand on a practice pad. And they can do that pretty loudly to get like a nice, good, solid wrist stroke because it's a practice pad. It's not very loud, right? So yeah, so I do think that in the first year, they have to have a solid grip on that. Our percussionists at the end of first year know all of their basic rudiments that are required for auditions. So that's like, long roll, 5-stroke roll, 9-stroke roll, flam tap, paradiddle, drag, lesson 25. So those are all of the audition rudiments in my district for middle school. So we cover all of that in 6th grade. And then they should know about 4 to 5 scales at the end of 6th grade on the mallet instruments. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a goal that every kid is reading music really well. So of course, on mallets in particular, it's really important to me that they have played timpani at some point in the year. So if we're playing a piece that doesn't have timpani, I will write a timpani part for it and put a kid on it because I want every single kid to have the experience of playing timpani, because then you can talk about tuning and you can talk about, working out their ear and that sort of thing. And it's a really good topic for percussionists to get into in the early stages. I don't do a lot of accessory percussion instruction in the first year. We do play pieces that have accessories. So if we're playing a piece with a vibra slap or with a triangle or whatever, then I will show that kid how to do whatever they need to do for that song. But I don't spend a lot of time on accessories until the later years. I try to keep them on snare and mallets as much as possible in the first year so they can get their reading skills up. So those are like kind of like my absolute like must do things in the very first year.
Would you, if you didn't have to have your percussionist with your wind players, would you do more than 4 or 5 scales? Because my theory is the mallets are so visual that we can really get around that instrument pretty quick by just seeing the shapes.
Yeah, I'd say if I had percussionists on their own, I would do more scales. If I have more different types of instruments, I would do less scales, probably. In 6th grade. Now, by the time they get to 7th and 8th grade, they're playing a ton of scales in 2 octaves. But in the first year of instruction, I spent a lot of time on about 4 scales, 4 or 5 scales. And then in 7th and 8th grade, we do a ton more. But yeah, I mean, the percussion is so visual, but you have to balance, if they're not on their own, you have to balance the needs of the group and kind of pace it along with that. One thing that I do in our fundamentals, we can talk about fundamentals I could talk about it for hours, literally hours. But one thing that I do also believe in, as far as like the odd even rotation, is I've paired up a snare rudiment with every major scale that we play. And every time we play that scale, people on snare drum play a very specific rudiment, right? So for me, I'll just pick one, concert E flat. I've paired up paradiddle with concert E flat. So whenever the band plays concert E flat, the snare drummers are playing paradiddles. Now there might be 8th note paradiddles, there might be 16th note paradiddles, depending on how old they are, but I've paired up a rudiment with every single scale. And that is so helpful for getting them practice on all the rudiments. Because when you get into 7th grade and we're playing all the scales, then they can go through tons of rudiments as we go through each scale. So yeah, I think that's a really good way to kind of build up their fundamental time.
And is that about what you normally do with your warm-up fundamental thing? Is scales and rudiments, or do you have other exercises you do?
So I have published on my Flying Baton podcast website, I have a set of fundamentals that I have developed over years and years and years that have specifically paired up snare and mallet stuff that makes sense with the fundamentals that the band needs. And I spent a lot of time on this because, I feel like when a lot of bands are warming up, the conductor's spending a lot of time with the winds and the percussionists are doing very little. So here's like kind of like one of my big pet peeves. Rehearsal starts and the conductor's like, all right, let's do concert B flat scale in half notes or whole notes or whatever. And then they just have the mallet instruments just do rolls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think about it, doing a roll is probably the worst way to warm up possible, because when you're doing a roll on a mallet instrument, you're hitting the mallet instrument super fast to get a sustain, right? Like, could you imagine if you told a trumpet player, all right, first thing we're going to play in class, you're going to play as fast and loud as humanly possible. Like nearly every wind player would tell you that's a horrible idea and you should never warm up that way, right? But then they ask their percussionists to do that. So like if you start out percussionists, like, all right, everybody do rolls for all these scales, then their hands start tensing up. Because to do a roll, especially if you're on xylophone, which is a very staccato instrument, you have to move your hands so fast. It's not a good way to warm up the muscles at all. So I've paired certain snare drum and mallet skills to each skill that the woodwinds have in a way that kind of makes sense and builds up all the things that I need them to know. So as an example, I have a pretty extensive page of Remingtons for the winds. I have about 6 of them for the winds. And when they're doing that, percussionists are doing accent tap exercises on the snare drum or alternating timing patterns, depending on which Remington it is. And then the mallet players, instead of rolling the half notes, like the band's playing half notes, like da, 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 that sort of thing, instead of rolling that on the mallets, I have them doing eighth notes when the band is doing half notes. So they're able to get a nice big legato stroke that's relaxing for their hand and good for their technique, instead of trying to play a roll just like super fast with their hands. And then we get into lip slurs, which I call trampolines in exercise packets. So that's great for brass, obviously, to work out their lips. It's great for woodwinds to work on slurring really weird fingerings and getting it smooth. So for percussionists, I've paired that up with a natural sticking exercise, because that's something percussionists struggle with a lot when they're really young, is natural sticking. They try to do everything alternating sticking, and then the rhythm falls apart. So I made a lot of natural sticking exercises to go along with the lip slur. And then for articulation exercises, I have a whole bunch of stuff for the winds, and then percussionists are doing different flam exercises for that. For the scales, we already talked about that. I have rudiments assigned for every scale that we play. So yeah, there's just a lot of things. So I've just kind of paired up a snare skill with every single kind of fundamental I want the band to do. And 7th and 8th grade, it's pretty extensive. In 6th grade, it's really pared back, but the same sort of concept is still there. I want the percussionists working on something that's good for them at the same time that the winds are working on something that's really good for them.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Is that like a product that you're selling, or is this just something that you're using with your band?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't intend to plug anything, so sorry for anyone who thinks I'm just a money grubbing whore. No, it's like $30, I think, on the website, and all the PDFs are included. So for every instrument in the band, there's a PDF packet. There's a score for the conductor, and if anyone purchases it, they get unlimited photocopy rights forever. So every new group of kids that can come in, they can just hit print the whole exercise packet, boom, and give it to them. And it's predominantly designed for 2nd and 3rd year players. I do have a lot of stuff I've written for 6th graders, for beginners, but not in a published format. I haven't published anything for that. So this is really for 7th and 8th graders predominantly. But yeah, it's like unlimited photocopy rights forever. I just ask people not to share it with other directors. Like if another director would like to have it, if they could pay for it, that would be great. But once they do, unlimited photocopy rights, copy it for as many kids as you want forever. And the reason why I did that is because I just didn't really like any of the products that were out there. And I spent a lot of time specifically trying to figure out how to incorporate percussion into the wind band warm-up in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the Ultimate Warm-Up by Jerry Gilroy, but it always fascinated me. It was like a marching band warm-up, but it went through every stock drumline warm-up kind of seamlessly. And it's not like I use it or anything, but that always fascinated me where people were able to find like the middle ground. Because like you said, it's always, all right, Matt, let's go ahead and roll.
Yeah. A lot of honor band clinicians, they'll spend a lot of time with the band on like scales or long tones or call and response. And I've seen a lot of, honor band conductors just have percussionists literally just stand in the back and not do anything during that time. That always breaks my heart a little bit. So I've kind of adapted some of these for when I do an honor band conducting gig. So it's like a super scaled down one pager, but it has some stuff for percussion to do. I don't sell that or anything. I just kind of use it for me. But yeah, I just really appreciate making sure the percussionists have something to do. As far as like the other books that are out there, I think the book that probably comes the closest that I like the best is probably Foundations of Superior Performance. Does a good job of pairing up like drummy stuff with wind stuff. My only complaint is that it's way too hard for middle school. Like the stuff in there gets really advanced really fast.
But he does have the option, so you don't need to do the advanced option. I think that's cool about that book.
Yeah, it does have like lots of different variations to go through. I think it's a great series. I think for me, there's enough of it that I would omit for middle school that I felt the need to just develop my own thing that was like 8 pages long that I could just give the kids for free instead of having them purchase a book that we're not going to use to its fullest potential. Now, if there's a middle school that is like has a really great relationship with a high school and they have a really good continuous curriculum from like 6th grade to 12th grade, and they want to buy that book early and just start adding things as they go through high school, then I think it would be great. At my particular situation, there's not a very good continuous curriculum from 6 to 12. There's the high school director does things very, very differently. So, but if we were more synced up, then maybe we would try to use the same book, but we aren't. So I kind of developed my own thing.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. A few episodes ago, I actually talked about that book and a few other, the Standard of Excellence and Essential Elements. I happen to really like that one because I'm a huge Mark Wessels fan. I mean, I think that guy he's thought of everything, I don't know if you've used any of his like lesson books.
So Mark Wessels was one of the first people to put any sort of percussion instruction on the internet. So like I was in high school in like the late 90s, right? And I grew up in a fairly poor household. So I couldn't afford lessons or anything like that. And when I switched from playing clarinet and oboe and switched to percussion, since I couldn't afford lessons, I just went to the internet. And in the late 90s, there was not a whole lot on the internet, like period, but especially instruction. Like now you can go on YouTube and watch 1,000 videos on 5-stroke rolls. Like it's very specific now. You can learn pretty much whatever you want now. But at the time, there really wasn't anything out there. And one of the few websites that there was Mark Wessels, had a bunch of stuff up on his website to like learn the rudiments and learn some technique. There's another website I think called drumbum.com that might still exist. I don't know, where you could download like sheet music of stuff. But Mark had a lot of like instructional material that was really great. And then I think he got scooped up by Vic Firth to do a lot of their production stuff and their education stuff. But yeah, his stuff, I haven't used any of his method books, but I really appreciate the things that he has done for the profession.
Yeah, it's definitely what we need more of. So I have a question that I thought of while you mentioned conducting honor bands. It's not on the list, but I'm curious. Do you think percussionists conduct differently?
Oh, like percussionist conductors conduct differently?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have analyzed enough conductors to answer that question. I would say I probably cue percussion less than a wind conductor. It's kind of funny, like being in front of a band, I will often tune percussion out, which I know sounds a little weird because it's my primary instrument, but I think it's kind of like the plight of a lot of like percussionist and band director relationships. Like if I don't hear anything wrong coming from the percussion section, I'm normally pretty happy enough not to like listen super carefully a lot of the time. At least like, cause in middle school, especially, like I'm working so hard to get the sound of the band right. If percussion is making good sounds, I don't pay as much attention to them as I probably should. So if we're playing a piece of music and percussion is just kind of always hitting their cues, I don't really cue them a lot when I'm conducting, unless I really need to. As far as like arm motions and expression, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't think I've seen a lot of percussionists conduct to be able to answer that question. I know I'm a very emphatic conductor. I would say there's more of a difference between a middle school conductor and a high school conductor than there is between a wind conductor and a percussion conductor, right? It's like middle schoolers are barely looking at you, right? We spend a lot of time trying to train them how to look at the conductor and interpret the motions of the conductor. But a lot of them, just playing music is so new for them. They're like super hyper focused on the page and just concentrating enough to play what's on the page. So they don't watch as well because they're very new to reading music, especially like 6th grade, right? They're barely looking at you. So in middle school, I find I'm a very, very emphatic, in my cues. Like if the trumpet section comes in after a long rest, I turn my entire body to the trumpets and give a giant cue when they come in. Whereas like in high school, you might just kind of look at them with your head, or give like a little tiny flick. But in middle school, it's like, now the trumpets are coming in, just because they're not watching a lot. So I tend to be very animated when I'm conducting middle school in particular, just because like a lot of middle schoolers, like the biggest problem that they have isn't like a lack of ability, it's a lack of confidence. So like you'll have a kid who counts their 17 measures of rest just fine, but they're not sure that they counted it fine. So if you don't look at them when they come in, they actually won't play because they're not sure if they're supposed to. Like they counted just fine. They brought their instrument up, but if you don't cue them, then they don't come in because they're unsure of themselves and they don't want to be like wrong, right? They don't want to be incorrect. So I find myself giving a lot of very generous cues in middle school that you perhaps would not do in high school or college. So yeah, I find that to be more of a differentiating factor than being a percussionist.
Sure. The reason I ask, I did a youth symphony when I was in high school, and I remember just kind of having the feeling like, oh man, this guy conducting right now, he thinks of time maybe a little differently. Like he's being a little less artsy, with his beat pattern, and it's very clear because he knows what he would want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I've played under a lot of different conductors. With the Waynesboro Orchestra, I can play under Peter Wilson. And Peter Wilson just retired from the Marine Band. He's a violin player, and he spent the last 20 years playing in the White House. So like foreign dignitaries come in, like he'll arrange music in the style of the music from that person's country and like play it on violin or arrange it for his quartet or, all kinds of things. So he's, essentially been a small ensemble performer for very high level people for 20 years. But when you watch him conduct, it's super precise. Like you would maybe think he was a percussionist. Everything is very precise and articulate and very clear. It's one of the reasons why I love playing under his baton, is because I always know what he wants when he wants it. But he's a violin player, And I've played under other conductors who are string players that their conducting is very nebulous and very ambiguous, and I have a hard time finding the beat. So I think that's more maybe like a personal thing, and maybe has less to do with the instrument that they play.
Sure. Has playing professionally in a large group like that, has that affected the way you teach? Because a lot of band directors, they go to school and then they graduate and then they're band directors and they're not constantly kind of, in the trenches.
So one thing I find really handy, well, a lot of things. Okay, so I play in two groups. I play in the Waynesboro Symphony Orchestra, which I'm actually retiring from after this season. I'm stepping down, and that's just to get more time at home with my little boy. But I also play in a group called the Valley Wind Ensemble. And the Valley Wind Ensemble, which meets in Harrisonburg, is a full-size concert band made up entirely of band directors and college professors. So they're all professional musicians or professional educators. And playing with that group is so great for many reasons. For one, you get the camaraderie and you get the networking, which is great. But I think that something that's really important for all teachers, especially middle school teachers, but all teachers, is to be able to have a standard of sound that you're comparing your group against, right? So when I'm playing with professional musicians regularly, that is my standard that I'm trying to achieve. If I only heard middle school band all day, every day, I feel like my standards would slip a little bit, because that's what my ear would just kind of adapt to, that sound, But I'm regularly playing with these professional, semi-professional groups, so my ear is finely tuned to what really high level playing sounds like. So I always have something to push my band towards. Now I know my middle school is never going to sound like a professional group, but I have like a goal, and like we push towards that goal. And I think that's important. I do think it's important to be under someone else's baton, and not necessarily just to play your instrument, because a lot of us, by the time you get out of college, you've played your instrument a lot. I think it's sort of important to keep up the skills on your instrument, but I think it's more important to be a member of the band and not be in front of the band all of the time. It's good to be a follower sometimes, and I think that gives you perspective to be a better leader when you go back to your band. Because every conductor does things differently, they say things differently, they treat people differently. And I think it's really important to get those other perspectives to bring back to your school.
Yeah, agreed. That's awesome. As you did the Crossman, so I'm very curious, did they have ways of breaking down foot technique and like the choreography that comes with four mallets, or did they like achieve that some other, like more organic way? Did they have like exercises for your feet?
So I marched in 2004. And so front ensemble in drum corps in particular, and by extension, high schools, because a lot of times they mimic what goes on in drum corps and WGI and things like that. Well, a lot of high schools do WGI now, which was not the case when I marched. So the front ensemble has evolved a lot over time. When I was marching in 2004, there was a pretty big push against what we call fake expression. So at the time, that was really looked down upon. Like these choreographed motions and like exaggerated facial expressions. At the time, it was seen as like, oh, that's fake, and we don't want to be fake. And there were a few groups who did a lot of very animated stuff, like the Cavaliers in the early 2000s did a lot of very animated stuff. And in the Crossman, when I marched, we did a lot of audience interacting. So like we would pick somebody out like on the front row, and like periodically in the show, we'd like point to them, or like, make faces at them, or like, we try to interact with the audience. And we would, of course, interact with each other and look at each other, but nothing was choreographed. And in fact, you had groups at the time like Santa Clara Vanguard, with Jim Ancona in the early 2000s. At the time, his philosophy was like, hey, I don't even care what mallet grip you use. So they had years where some kids were using Stevens grip, some kids were using Burton grip, some kids were using traditional cross grip. Like they didn't care. As long as you sounded good, they didn't care what you looked like. And then once you get out of the early 2000s, that really changed dramatically, where like uniformity became so much more important in the scoring that like it pretty much every drum corps mandated, not only does everybody have to use the same grip, but now everyone's body needs to look the same. And that wasn't the case before. It's like when I marched, we weren't really doing that, but it kind of the pendulum swung back hardcore in the other direction, where front ensembles had these very elaborate choreographed moves. And it was more of like, and I wouldn't say that it's fake. I would say it's more theatrical. It's more plans, like a ballet is planned. When this happens in the music, our bodies are going to do this. And I also think that's very beautiful. I would not categorize it as like fake expression, but it's very different than what we were doing when I marched. So we did not talk about that sort of thing. But I know now the uniformity aspect and the visual expression plays so much of a bigger role in the activity than it used to.
Yeah, for sure. I for sure don't like the over emoting thing, but orchestral musicians use the fact that we hear with our eyes all the time, like a timpanist lifting a stroke up and now with a longer note, so no talks about any sort of like lifting. You guys just kind of did what was natural to you.
Well, lifting is a different topic. So there's a guy by the name of Mike Schutz, who I believe teaches up in Canada now. He used to teach at Longwing University here in Virginia. He did a pretty extensive research project on what we see with our eyes versus what we hear. And he actually got Michael Burritt to do all of the sound samples, who, if you're listening, is a well-known marimba player and percussion teacher. But he had Michael play like one note on a marimba several different ways. So he would play it and then keep the mallet in the down position, like hovering like an inch over the bar. And he played the same note and like bounced the mallet way up high in the air with this big, exaggerated long stroke, And sonically, there's no difference, right? So once you strike a mallet bar, whatever your hand does afterwards does not make any difference to the sound acoustically. But here's the point of like Mike's research that was really important. It made a huge impact on people's perception of the sound. So he had many people look at these video samples, and nearly everybody, I think it was like 70% of the people that saw Michael Burritt do a very exaggerated ricochet bounce off the bar reported that the note was longer than in the videos where he does a more like sharp attack and then keeps the mallet hanging low. They said that the other one had a longer sound. It didn't. Like you could look at it on a DAW and see that the sound is identical, but people said that the long stroke made the note longer. And Mike's whole like kind of thesis was like perception is reality. So even though making these like exaggerated lifting motions after you strike a bar doesn't change the way the instrument sounds, people think it does, so it does.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't, but it does, because people think that it does. Now I say on the mallet instruments, I do have my kids like lift up like pretty high after they strike, but it's less for that reason and more for a technical reason. Like if you keep your mallet heads low to the keyboard, you can't cross over very well. And a lot of times in mallet playing, you need to reach across to hit different notes. And if you pull up your mallets out of the way, you have more room to reach over and hit accidentals and things like that. If you keep your mallet heads way down where the bars are, you have more of a chance of like clicking your sticks or like not being able to reach certain things. So in drum corps, we pretty much had the same philosophy. It was less about the sound or the visual aspect and more of like keeping your mallets in the up position is better for your technique and will allow you to play more relaxed.
Yeah, I love that. Now, did you come up with that perception is reality thing? That's beautiful. I love that.
Oh, that was the whole point of Mike's paper. Like you can go read it. Mike Schutz is his name. He has his whole thesis on it. He's got audio and video and all kinds of stuff. That's really great. And it really changed how I thought about things. Because I read a paper written by Lee Stevens, who is the inventor of the Stevens script for the non-percussionist. And Lee Stevens did a very lengthy article on his website about, doing downstroking versus upstroking and how it doesn't change the sound at all, so it shouldn't matter, was essentially what Lee was saying. But Mike's research was important because it was like, sonically it doesn't matter, but people think that it matters, so it does matter. So yeah, it was a beautiful paper. It was really cool to watch. Like he's embedded a lot of what do they call them? Optical illusions into his paper to demonstrate certain concepts and like kind of relate it to sound. It was very cool. This is a good read.
Yeah. You mentioned you have a like 50-50 marimba and snare drum. Do you push drum set?
I don't. So if a kid does not play drum set and they want to learn and they join up the after school jazz band that we do in the fall or the spring, we can show them some things. But I find that drum set's one of those instruments that like, if a kid's really motivated to do it, then they will look on YouTube, they'll do some research, they'll maybe take some lessons, that sort of thing, or maybe they'll take lessons with me or whatever. And we can show them those things. I don't do it as like a unit in class. And part of the reason is why I don't have a percussion only class. If I did have a percussion only class, then maybe I would go into that. But since my percussionists, as they go through middle school, are combined with larger and larger groups of people, we can't really sit around and talk about percussion very much. We do play pop charts for various pop concerts that we do, where there's like snare, ride, snare, hi-hat parts, so they can work on the hand part of it, but not the feet part of it. So they do get some exposure to ride patterns and hi-hat patterns and that sort of thing, but not on a full drum set. Now, if you go look at Steve's videos that he posts on Facebook, I saw one the other day. He had like 30 kids playing drum set at one time. Like I don't know how many kids are in his school that he can have like a drum set class of like 30 kids and have the funding to have that many drum sets. And when he ran out of drum sets, he like made makeshift drum sets with like practice pads and like other stuff. So that's cool, but I don't have a percussion only class to do that with.
Yeah, I'm really spoiled. I teach at 5 middle schools now, and some of them have a percussion class. And at one in particular, it's a really nice thing to do when it's like a Friday and they have a slightly shorter day. I don't know if you guys do this, but here in Orlando, like every day has a slightly different schedule in the schools. Like one day is Wednesday is an hour shorter. Some of the days are a full 7 periods, some are 4 block periods. But on a Friday when we have like a shorter class, especially if the band director is out judging or something, I just have them line up and teach them, some sort of simple groove and all right, go. All right, go. All right. And it's not something we do really consistently, but I noticed there's like less drum set players now, when I first joined band, like I thought I would be playing the drum set. Yeah, and then I find out, I have to like stand up and like play the snare drum and bass drum and all that stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure why that is. I do see on your list of questions something that I did hope we could talk about, which is how to select percussionists.
Yes, please.
I think that's an important question. You have a lot to say about that.
Hopefully I don't get canceled for saying this. I think there needs to be a pretty even gender split in your percussion section. If you have 11 middle school boys in the back of your room, you're gonna have a bad time.
Right.
And I love my middle school boys. They're crazy, but I love them. But like if you have a more even gender balance in your percussion section, like things are just gonna be better for a lot of reasons, right? So, back in the day, like when I was going through middle school in the 90s, it wasn't uncommon at the time for there to be like a lot of sexism in instrument selection. In some parts of the country, this is still the case, unfortunately. But, like back in the day, it'd be like, okay, boys are going to play drums and only girls can play the flute, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's still some schools in America today where they do not let male students play the flute. I've talked with directors who this is still happening today, which blows my mind. It's 2023. I don't know why that's still a thing. I have lots of boys on flute. They love it. Like I just can't fathom that that's still a thing, but it is, unfortunately. But I think when it comes to selecting your percussionist and you have your instrument tryout night, I think it's important to encourage boys and girls, or however they choose to identify, like a nice diverse mix in your percussion section. I have definitely seen schools where only boys play percussion, and that's a bad time. Or another thing that happened in the 90s a lot is boys would play snare drum and girls would play mallets. That was a thing that was pretty big when I was growing up. And I think that has mostly kind of been eliminated. But yeah, so that was a thing for a long time. And that's why I think the odd even split is so important, right? Like every day you will switch to the other one, the other instrument. So they're always getting equal exposure on everything. And they're not fighting over things. Because another time, if band directors just let kids pick what they play for warm-ups, your kids with your stronger personalities, regardless of gender, your kids with stronger personalities are going to get what they want and kind of bully everybody else into playing the instruments they don't want to play, So I think the odd even rotation is really important. And I think that works out really well. As far as like selecting the percussionist, I do know some band directors that require their percussionist to have piano experience. I don't live in a high enough socioeconomic area that enough of my kids even have any musical experience walking in the door to be able to do that. I'm in an urban school setting. Most of our kids are in poverty, so there's not a lot of kids that take piano lessons in my area. If someone's at like a more wealthy area or with a much larger school, they might be able to make that a requirement. I don't think that it needs to be. Some of my absolute best mallet readers had no piano experience whatsoever. They just really love playing percussion and they figured it out. So I don't think that should be a requirement personally, but I do know directors that do that. What I'm looking for when I'm auditioning kids is I'm listening for really good auditory memory. So the first thing I do is and I'm doing my instrument tryout nights this Thursday, actually. So I'll have the kids come over and we're on a practice pad and I'll show them how to hold the sticks. And the very first thing that I do before we even play a note is I have them put the sticks out on the playing zone in front of the drum. And I have them lift their sticks all the way up and lift them all the way back down without hitting anything. Just, I want to see how their wrists move naturally. Like a lot of kids, when they start moving their wrists, will tilt their hands sideways into this, like what we call French grip, where your thumb is on top. And if I take their hands and I'm like, okay, no, it needs to go like this, and I tilt their hands back over, if they can't do that and they just gravitate right back to turning their hands upside down, I know they're going to have a bad time. I wouldn't say that they like can't play percussion, but some kids don't have a lot of body awareness or coordination. The next thing we do on the practice pad is I do some very simple rhythms, like very simple stuff like tat, 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 tat. And then I start mixing in some slow 16th note patterns like dat, digga, digga, dat, dat, and stuff like that, and see if they can coordinate their hands and match what they're hearing. If I'm playing very basic rhythms and the kid cannot reproduce them, they're going to have a really bad time at percussion. And I see this every year. Several kids, like I'll go ta ta ti ti ta on the snare drum, 1, 2, 3, and 4, however you want to count. and they can't do that. Like they will copy the rhythm incorrectly. So that kid has no hope of playing a flamadiddle, right? If they can't do 1, 2, 3, and 4 with one hand, they're going to have a really hard time learning any rudiment. Okay, that kid just doesn't have enough like mind to hand coordination to be able to play percussion well. Now, it's not to say they couldn't be in the percussion section and you could find things for them to play that are less dexterous. That's kind of the beauty of the percussion section, is it's like wildly differentiated. You can have your hot shot play the crazy snare mallet parts, and the kids that maybe aren't so good, you can have them, hit the occasional triangle hit or something. But if I have a lot of kids that want to play percussion and I need to pare it down to like 10 kids, I do look at things like that. And the next thing I do is I have them go over to a student bell kit, and I show them, and the student bell kits have all the note names on the bars. I say, okay, we're going to start on C. Here's C. And then I play some very simple patterns like C, D, E, D, C. Sorry for anyone with perfect pitch. It's probably not a C. But so I have them do some very basic patterns and see if they can copy those. And once again, if they can't copy those very simple patterns, the likelihood of them being able to keep their eyeballs up on a page and play those patterns without looking down is like 0. It's essentially 0. They have to be able to do it mimicking before they can do it reading. And there are some kids that just have such a hard time with that I think they can select percussion, but they're going to have a much harder time than the kids who can do those things more easily. So I definitely check for that. Another thing I check for is ability to follow directions. Percussionists, there's a lot of responsibility to playing percussion. You're in the back of the room, you're standing for long periods of time, and a lot of times the band director is going to be cleaning the winds, and you just have to be patient. Okay. So if I have a kid in the audition, like when we're doing instrument tryouts, and I'm like, okay, hold the sticks just like this, and they start immediately banging on the drum, I just make a little note on my own personal sheet to not allow that person to play percussion at all. And I don't care how good their audition is after that. If I'm like, hold the stick just like this, and they just start beating things, you are going to have a bad time when that person gets in a classroom of 50 kids and they're in the back of the room and have to wait longer than 2 seconds to do something, right? They're going to go nuts. Okay, so I learned a lot about the kids in the tryout process, and I'm like, this person maybe should be a percussionist. This person probably does not have the attention span to be a percussionist and be successful. So those are the big things that I look out for. And I think I'm going to do that this week on Thursday. We have like an instrument tryout night, but we have our kids try. We have our kids try every single instrument. So I make all of the 5th graders try every instrument. Even if they have known since they were 2 that they want to play trumpet, I still have them try every single instrument before they make a decision. And that's really handy because a lot, if you just go to 5th grade and you're like, cool, what instrument do you guys want to play? They'll all say percussion and saxophone, percussion and trumpet. I got a billion trumpet players this year, right? That's what they'll say. But then you get them into an audition room and let them try everything. And they're like, man, French horn's awesome, because they don't know a lot about the instruments that aren't in pop music. So giving them an opportunity to come in and try it will really help. Because I think another problem a lot of band directors have is too many kids want to play percussion, right? So if I get into that scenario where 15 kids pick percussion and I only really want 10 for my size band, I only want 10. I will call in those 15 kids to come in over the summer, and I'll try them on a couple other instruments and see what they think. And without me even suggesting anything, most of the time, enough of them will want to switch to a wind instrument because they liked it so much that I don't have to talk anybody out of it. I'll just be like, hey, here's a clarinet. Let's make some cool sounds on this. And we'll just play clarinet for a little bit. And they're like, this is awesome. I think I want to switch. And I don't even, so I don't have to cut anybody, so to speak, or break any hearts. They make that decision kind of on their own, and that's kind of how you can curate your percussion section a little bit and make sure you don't have too many kids kind of back there. And that's the other thing too, you don't want too many percussionists just because there's not enough things for them to do all of the time. And that can lead to behavior problems too, if there's too many kids back there. And I will throw out one more thing just because I had a whole podcast episode about this. A lot of band directors tell me I can't get my kids to play mallets.
I love that episode. That was a great episode. You did great.
I'll summarize it here so you don't the listeners don't have to go listen to it. I mean,
But they should.
the biggest thing, if they're like, my kids don't want to play mallets, I say, what do you have? And in a lot of cases, what they have is a 40-year-old out of tune xylophone and like a crappy set of bells from the 70s. And I'm like, I don't want to play on those either. I'm a percussionist. I don't want to play on those. Like, if you take make a little investment, $2,000 to $4,000, I think, educational pricing, not list pricing, educational pricing, you can get like a pretty decent synthetic marimba that goes down to an A, and the kids will like literally fight over it. They will fight, specifically the bass end. They want to be in the low octave. Like, give them some nice soft mallets. They will fight over that marimba. But if all that you have for them to play is a plinky xylophone, I mean, I've been playing percussion for a long time. I hate playing xylophone. I hate xylophone. I can't stand it. I mean, I'll do it if I'm asked to in like the wind ensemble or whatever. But I don't like playing xylophone. It's an awful instrument. It's plinky, it's staccato, it's brittle. It hurts your ears if you play it hard enough. Like, I don't want to play xylophone, right? And I'm a percussionist. But you're talking about a marimba or a nice vibraphone. Heck yeah, I want to play that all day long. So I know these things cost money and everyone's financial situation is different. So if your school doesn't have a good budget, I would say do a little bit of fundraising. Do a fundraiser and be like, we want a marimba, and hype the kids up and be like, cool, let's go fundraise and let's just make it happen, or tap into some community organizations that might be able to donate. But if you get a nice marimba, and it doesn't have to be a rosewood marimba. In fact, I would not recommend a rosewood marimba in most schools, like especially middle schools. But get like a nice synthetic marimba. Like the Musser synthetic is great. I love the Musser synthetic because it rings a little bit longer than rosewood. It's almost like a vibraphone in how long it rings, but it has a very pretty sound. They're like indestructible. Or get a nice vibraphone, and then you can talk about pedaling with the kids, and the kids who've had piano will love that. It's like, oh, it's got a pedal like my piano? Sweet. And they'll be into that. So if you have good instruments for them to play on, the kids will be more likely to want to play mallets. And then when you're doing your odd and even rotations, no one's going to complain about it because they have a good instrument to go play. So I think that's really, really important. So that plus the odd even rotation pretty much eliminates that problem for a lot of people.
And another benefit of the marimba is that more than one kid can play it. You get a lot of bang for your buck.
Yeah, actually, so I have a lot of percussionists in 6th grade this year. I put 3 people on marimba, 2 people on xylophone, and I try to get 1 person on vibes, but you can fit 2 people on vibes for most 6th grade stuff and most fundamentals. You can put 2 people on vibes if you need to. But yeah, 3 people on a marimba, easy for almost any kind of fundamental. Now, if you're doing a lot of 2 octave scales, you can only put 2 people on a marimba. But yeah, you can fit a lot of kids on that instrument. You get a lot of bang for your buck. I think working on pedaling is great. Like, you want to talk about engagement, right? You can take a simple fundamental or exercise and then work pedaling into it. Like, cool, you've mastered this on marimba. Now come to vibraphone, and I want you to pedal about every 2 beats. Or if you're doing a scale, I teach them to either half pedal or pedal every quarter note of the scale. So they can get used to the bars not ringing all together, but having enough sustain to fill out the sound. There's so many things you can work on with a vibe that, I think is challenging for the kids after they've mastered like just the 2-hand thing.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So just to kind of close things out here, I'm very curious about this. You did marimbology, then years later kind of relaunched it as Marimbology 2.0. And then you're the flying baton guy. So is there anything else in your head that you're kind of working on? Like, do you have like a next thing you could plug, or you got any ideas?
My next thing is upstairs going down for bedtime.
Yeah,
No, truly. So I started the Marimbology, the percussion YouTube channel, when I was a math teacher and I needed a percussion teaching outlet. After my band career started to take off, I stopped making those videos for a bit. I don't know, I probably have made one of those in like 5 years or so. And I focused more on just being a really good band director. And then I got into doing the podcast in 2020. I really like that. But I don't know, I used to have like a million hobbies. Like, I was really big into music tech and, composing stuff and recording. And, I was into like so many different things. And then after having my son, it's like, okay, I really need to pare down what I'm doing a lot. So because I want to spend time with them, and I think it's gonna get real here for a second. And I do not mean to offend anybody when I say this, but there are a lot of divorced band directors, and I don't want that for my family. And I know it's not always something you can control per se, because that's a two-way street. But so many of us music teachers are married to the job, and we spend 60 to 80 hours a week doing the thing that we love to do, especially if you're a high school director and you have marching band and musical and all these other things. We love what we do. We love working with kids. It's very easy to sink 80, 100 hours into a work week just to try to get, provide more opportunities for our kids, or like make the music that much better, or, do all these like trips and competitions and all this stuff. But if having a family is really important to you, and it's not for everybody, but if it's something that's really important to you, you need to make sure that you're home. You know what I mean? Now, I do know several band directors that don't have a family and they don't want a family, and they are 100% fine being married to the job. And I have no issue with that. Like, if that's what they want and that's what they want to do, more power to them. For me personally, family is extremely important to me, which is the whole reason why I taught math in the first place. Like, there were band jobs open in other parts of the state that I didn't even apply for because I wanted to get married and live with my now wife. That was a higher priority to me than starting my career as a band director. So instead, I started my career as a math teacher because the family was that much more important to me personally. And I knew when I had my son 3 years ago, I was like, he's only going to be young once. And that's part of the reason why I'm stepping down from orchestra. I just did my last orchestra concert this past weekend. And I've been playing with the orchestra for 10 years, and I'm stepping down. Not because I don't enjoy playing. I still enjoy playing. I love Peter Wilson. He's an amazing conductor. But every Tuesday night, I would go to rehearsal for 3 hours. And it got to the point this year where I would go to rehearsal or like try to walk out the door to go to rehearsal, and my son would literally try to block me from leaving. Like, he would like be pushing against my body, begging me not to go to rehearsal. And about the second time that happened, I sat down with the conductor and I was like, hey man, after this season, I'm out. Because he's 3 and he wants to spend time with me right now. Now, being a middle school director, I know full well when he gets to be about 13, 14, 15 years old, he's going to care a lot less about hanging out with me.
Yeah, you can join the symphony again. Yeah.
And a lot more about hanging out with his friends and going on dates and that sort of thing. And then I can like start doing a lot of these gigs again. But I just know that like family is so important to me. I had to pare down the hobbies. So I am going to keep doing the podcast. I took a break from the podcast last semester because I was finishing up my master's degree, which I finally got my master's in administration from JMU, which was great. I really loved that coursework. It was great. No plans on quitting teaching anytime soon, but it was very valuable. But that was hard on our little family, doing grad school 1 to 2 nights a week, doing orchestra every Tuesday, doing wind ensemble every Monday. It was just so much time away from home. And like I said, he's only going to be young once, and I want to be there for it. So I've really scaled back everything to like pretty much just the podcast and the occasional video game in the late hours, before bed. And that's pretty much the extent of my hobbies these days. I really want to devote a lot of time to my son and making sure he grows up, with a dad who's around,
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really great. I try to not take too many gigs because God, I just love being home. I teach at schools and then I come home. I have time at home. All right. If you'll indulge me for just one more here, I think this will be a fun segment. And depending on your answer, we don't even have to air it. But what is some trouble? Because we're a troublesome bunch. What is some trouble you've gotten into in the back of the band room? Maybe your band director didn't even know.
It's like when I was a kid. Oh man, I don't know how much I'm comfortable divulging that. My first kiss was in the band room.
Of course, yes.
That means I'm a certified band nerd. All right.
That is what that means.
My first kiss was it was in the band room, ninth grade year. I don't know. I think I was by the time I joined percussion, I was pretty serious about it. So in middle school, I played clarinet and oboe. And in ninth grade, I played clarinet and oboe I played oboe in the concert band, but I played drumline and marching band because you can't march an oboe. So I did drumline instead. So I wasn't like a real percussionist. I just beat the bass drum or whatever. And then my band director and I, we did not get along like at all. We had a huge falling out the end of my 9th grade year, and I quit band. So my 10th grade year, I did not take band at all. I still did marching band because I loved playing with my friends in the drum line, but I could not stand my band director at all. And my 11th grade year, I decided, you know what? I like playing music more than I dislike him. So I'm going to join the percussion class. So I'm going to make a switch from oboe to percussion. I'm going to join the percussion class my junior year and get real serious about percussion. And so I joined the percussion class. The percussion class had about 10 people in it, all of whom played other instruments and not percussion. And my band director played solitaire on his computer in his office every class period, the entire year. He literally sat in his office and played video games and let me teach the class, which was weird because I wasn't a percussionist. But that's why I'm so grateful for people like Mark Wessels, because I just went online, and this is in the days of Napster, by the way. Napster, if anyone knows what that is, anyone, over the age of 35. So I would go on Napster and I would download like drum corps recordings, like 99 Blue Devils was amazing. I downloaded that and played that for the kids in class. I downloaded whatever sheet music was online, which was not a lot in 1999. I downloaded whatever sheet music was available. And then I brought it into class, and then I would teach class. I'd be like, all right, guys, here's what I found. And then we would just figure it out. So like, it was really amazing. And I loved doing it so much that I was like, I think I want to teach music for a living. And I was like, I can surely do a better job than that guy. Right.
That's similar to why I wanted to do it. My band director also was just malpractice practically, and I'm like, I want to fix this.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. Like if I had a competent band director, I don't think I would have majored in music. I probably would have been a computer engineer like all my friends are, but I liked teaching so much, and I had the opportunity to do it because my director wasn't. I was like, I think I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I went majored in music and loved it. So sorry, long answer to your question, but by the time I was an actual percussionist, I was a junior, and I was real serious about learning to get good. So I wasn't causing a lot of trouble in the back in those years. Had I been a middle school percussionist and not a middle school oboe player, I probably would have done all kinds of crazy things. But not so much by the time I was a real percussionist.
Right. Dude, I electrocuted myself once. And that's a real story. That is a real story.
I think everyone listening to this podcast is now going to go get those like infant outlet protectors and put them in all.
They'll need them
in the back.
Yeah, the percussion. Yes. Yeah. They'll need them. Yeah, I'm sure kids are doing way worse than that too. I was great next to some people, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy, man. I'm glad you're still alive. That could have gone south real quick.
All right. So once again, thank you so much for sitting down and getting so many great things out. I really, you hit on a lot of awesome stuff, man.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I did put together a conference proposal to talk about some of this stuff, to educate the band directors who want to learn more about percussion, who want to be more well-versed in that area. They're not making calls on what's going to get picked for conference for another couple months. So hopefully get selected. I would really love to talk to the directors in my state about that sort of thing. But yeah, I kind of came prepared for the interview, having already put that together of like kind of some of the things I feel really strongly about. So thanks for inviting me on the show and letting me the chance to talk about some of this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Charlie.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too, buddy.